Hi, welcome to today's episode of CP Soundbites. Today we're going to be discussing tokenization within the fund context. I'm joined by Riccardo and Stephen, and perhaps we can just start with some intros.
Hi, so my name is Stephen Gauci Baluci. I am the Managing Director of Kalamata Kushkiri Fund Services, which is part of the Kalamata Kushkiri Money Base Group. We offer fund administration services, including NAV calculation, transfer agency, regulatory reporting, and also corporate services.
Fantastic. And I'm Riccardo. I'm the CEO of Fume, co-founder. It's a fund tokenization platform. We started a few years ago as frustrated fund managers. So asset managers first, we started the operation. We really struggled with the administration of our fund. We felt that it was way too inefficient. So we basically created Fume. It's a platform to automate and simplify fund administration. First with the tokenization idea and then also with AI more recently.
Okay, just before we jump into the questions, Riccardo, so in terms of your, let's say, your touch points with Malta, how do you see Malta? Do you see it as an interesting market, a growth market? I mean, what is the reason why you picked Malta as one of your bases to do business?
So the reason we're here in Malta is thanks through a collaboration with Steve here. Of course, Malta is one of the fund centers of Europe. We started out of Luxembourg first. That's where we had the management company in there. And then we started expanding into different markets. More recently, the MFSA has also started looking into tokenization. That's also why we came here discussing with the regulators and so on, seeing what it's being done currently. Also with the conference tomorrow, looking forward to it.
Okay. All right. So at the moment, tokenization is kind of a bit of a buzzword, but if we are candid, we don't really have any tokenized funds here in Malta, which have already launched. We see large institutional managers, particularly in the US, using tokenization, but the tokenization is kind of concentrated in the large fund management houses. Do you think that tokenization favors scale, or this is where we are in terms of the curve, and we're going to face a trajectory where the small and mid-sized asset managers will start making use of tokenization?
Yeah, so we have to ask, why is just the big guys that are doing that? And I think here we'll take a bit of a contrarian approach in here. I think that the larger ones are the only ones that are doing that because they're the only ones that can afford to do it. Currently, we have seen a lot of people, especially for the past few years, talking about fund tokenization. There has been so many conferences around in there about tokenizing this, tokenizing that, and so on. But at the end of the day, seeing, let's say, live use cases, there are just very few of them. You see, I don't know, Franklin Templeton or a BlackRock or...
You mean globally, not only in Europe?
Exactly, okay. Not just in Europe, in there. And why are just those ones? Like there are so many investment funds. Why are not the normal fund manager, the alternative investment funds all over the world trying to tokenize their funds? Or a lot of people start looking into it. By the end of the day, they are not doing that. Because I believe that most of the use cases out there is just gimmicks. So I don't want to be a fund tokenization skeptic, but more recently, this is what the realization that we start having is that the actual use cases, or even the ones that are live, they are tokenizing it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's for sure marketing. They want to try something new, but what are the benefits that are actually bringing on the table? Not much. So for larger players, just to say, look, we want to do some research and development. We want to start testing, even if we spend $500,000, $1 million or so, just launching our tokenized funds. That's good.
It just sounds sexy.
Exactly. It sounds sexy. The other ones cannot afford it. So until we actually see a proper use cases, that is going to take a bit more time in there.
Okay. And if we can jump to the liquidity point. So do we think that tokenization actually generates new pools of liquidity? Because, I mean, if the underlying asset, right, backed by the token is illiquid, then how can a token referencing that same asset result in immediate liquidity?
Yeah. So here I'll take a step back and I want to define what is fund tokenization. Because fund tokenization is just this general broad term for everything that has to do with blockchain in an investment fund. So there are many things that you can, let's say, make much more, let's say, automated in the life cycle of an investment fund. And to its core, fund tokenization, meaning having a cap table of an investment fund, so your shareholder, so your share register, having it represented on chain with tokens. This is what tokenization is. Then over the past few years, it went much broader, meaning to everything that has to do with blockchain. So it means onboarding an investor, doing AML, KYC, and having a representation on chain of being whitelisted for a certain fund, having an identity, or having your life cycle of the NAV, or processing the payments directly on chain. Like our initial approach for fund tokenization was really automating everything that was the paying agent. So the idea of striking an NAV on chain, and then having to pay your management fee, performance fee, distribution to your investors, redeeming investor, getting out, and so on. All of those payments can be automated using programmable money on chain, using stablecoins. So those are, let's say, misused of the term tokenization, but this is what it came to be. Like a lot of people say tokenization, anything that has to do with blockchain on chain, right? So to your question, does it create more liquidity? It really depends on the underlying assets. So if you are trading something that is inherently illiquid, the fact that you have a tokenized units, so tokenization by itself does not create liquidity. If you have an illiquid fund, there is no secondary demand for your tokenized units, for your units. The fact they are tokenized or not tokenized, it doesn't change anything. Theoretically, yes, there is always this promise that if you have a fund, for example, VC fund, you might be locked in for 7-10 years or so. The idea of having tokenized, you could more easily transfer it in a secondary, but you need to have the demand for it. Tokenization itself doesn't create liquidity.
Okay, and do you see these neobank type platforms perhaps including the tokens kind of as an offering? And because today, I mean, you look at the way young people invest, it's very different to how it was in the past. It seems that younger generations, even if you look at the data, are not very interested in going to a bank or a broker to subscribe a fund. So could it perhaps be that new fintechs entering the market could provide wallets to hold these tokens, and that could increase liquidity to some extent?
Absolutely. So I think this is one of the more real use cases, meaning the disintermediation. The fact that before, if you wanted to buy a security, an instrument or so, you needed to go to a broker or invest through a clearing system and so on. So you have multiple intermediaries. The money would go from your bank to the bank of the clearing system to the bank of whatever, the bank of the investment funds, and then it goes to the bank of the broker where you buy the assets of the underlying assets of the fund and so on. So if you want to get out, well, there are all those intermediaries back again. The idea of having a tokenized funds, that's where it gets interesting. You can have directly, for example, your tokenized version of the euro, your euro stable coins. Instead of transferring from your bank account or from your broker, you as an investor have your own wallet with stablecoins euro. You arrive to this investment fund, you say, I want to invest, and the liquidity goes directly from your wallet to the wallet of the fund. And then you get directly the units in your own wallet. Yeah. So just like holding any other token, you can hold it directly. You don't have to pay a yearly fee to a custodian or so to maintain it.
Right. Okay, Steve, from your perspective, so there's been much talk that tokenization could replace the transfer agent and the fund admin. How do you see the relevance of the fund admin and transfer agent going forward if tokenization does become order of the day?
So, I mean, obviously, this is something which is going to happen in the future, which is happening slowly. So, in my opinion, I do believe that tokenization would not replace the fund administrator, but the job of the fund administrator is going to change. So where before we had the fund administrators which were focusing on manual repetitive tasks, now we're going to have the fund administrator who is going to focus on sort of checking and supervising that the smart contracts and that the output of the environment being created through the blockchain is providing the results which the fund administrator is happy with together with the manager. So I think as time progresses and as we see blockchain taking over and having funds being tokenized, the administrator is going to have a more active role in checking the output rather than focusing only on the repetitive tasks which the fund administrator nowadays is performing. So in reality, for example, when you have a subscription and redemptions, there is always a long process. So the investor needs to send the form or needs to enter into the AML portal, put in the information. We need to check that the shares being subscribed or redeemed and the NAV price is matching. So if all that will be now replaced with a smart contract, the fund administrator will have the responsibility to make sure that, for example, the registry has been updated correctly via the smart contract, or that the investor subscribing for the fund shares is actually eligible, that his wallet is whitelisted, that the jurisdiction where the investor is allowed. So everything will be embedded into a smart contract. And the smart contract then will perform all these checks also from an AML perspective. And the administrator would then need to ensure that the output is correct and obviously transparent. Because at the end of the day, having blockchain and having tokenized funds, the main advantage is not, the value is not really in the tokenization, but the environment surrounding all the process.
So thanks, Steve. In terms of NAV calculation, so if we're saying that the smart contracts are going to now be responsible for computing NAV, but the administrator, remains responsible, aren't we doubling up? How can an administrator simply rely on the calculation produced by the chain if ultimately will bear responsibility? How do you see that evolving? Any thoughts there?
I think, in my opinion, nowadays, when we do manual processing, we need to take in consideration that there is obviously, taking in consideration the control function, there is also a risk that errors or misstatements occur in the NAV calculation. So using a smart contract, we are not replacing the people who are working the fund administration. We are enhancing the process for them to be able to check the NAV calculation after all the desired results are inputted into the system. So the fund administrator will still be involved in the NAV preparation, but more from a checking point of view rather than a preparing point of view. So in my opinion, it might be the case that in the future, if we had a fund administrator working 3 NAV calculations, most probably they would be able to calculate more NAV calculations, but with the help of blockchain and the smart contracts, it will make things easier to catch any misstatements or any breaks in the reconciliations after and not before.
And if I can jump on this one, so it's definitely not having a tokenized funds that compete with the fund administrator. I think it's part of the fund administration. Like the whole idea of the current approaches right now that I'm really puzzling, struggling to understand, is that oftentimes it's the asset manager that looks for a fund tokenization solution. They try to adopt something and then they go to their fund admin and say, okay, I want to tokenize my fund. I'm going to use this platform. Can you do an administration of my fund?
Exactly.
And of course, any fund administrator, yes, or sure, I'm going to do the fund admin for your tokenized fund. But at the end of the day, it's still the all inefficient, let's say, the typical fund administration plus the complexity of having a tokenized funds on top. And for me, it doesn't make sense. Maintaining a cap table on chain or maintaining your shareholder register or publishing an NAV and so on, those are all fund administration function. So it doesn't make sense that it's the fund manager that manages this stuff. So it needs to come from the fund administrator. And this is what we have seen in the industry. The past few years, it has been consolidating with the larger players being, for example, Securitize. It started with a tokenization platform. They started buying other fund administrator, and that now it's one together. We have other ones, Tokenai, Apex, and so on. Again, this is the other way around. You have the fund administrator buying the fund tokenization platform. But again, if it's together, it makes sense. If you just go to the fund manager directly, you're just going to create more complication. It just becomes a gimmick. So it really needs to go to the fund admin and then being able to be distributed down to the fund managers.
And that is the way which sort of me and Riccardo met, because we have clients who obviously nowadays are trading crypto via funds. And obviously these people are knowledgeable with blockchain, they're knowledgeable with wallets, and they would like to subscribe into the fund using their wallets. So this is where it all started. So as Riccardo is correctly saying, it starts from the fund administration in many times, also obviously from the investment manager, but also from the fund administration function.
It's also interesting from a depository perspective. So under the AFMD, there's a very high degree of liability for depositories, and one of the core functions of the depository is oversight in terms of NAV calculation. So it will be interesting also to see how the depositories will develop their systems to start monitoring NAV calculation, because ultimately they will bear much of the responsibility. I mean, in terms of the fund admin, there isn't that type of liability at law. It's contractual liability which you can discharge yourself of. But from a depository perspective, it's a little different, because they have statutory liability, and therefore they'll need to develop their own systems to be able to ensure that the NAV is properly calculated.
Yeah. I think there are like two main ways of calculating the NAV, and it really depends on what are the underlying assets of your fund. If you have traditional assets that are, bankable assets or so, or it's even non-tokenized, even if it's, let's say, private equity or so, that are just non-tokenized, you can just have your normal NAV calculation, and then you just use the smart contract part to publish the results and to have it traceable on chain for the rest of paying the fees or so on, transferability, etc. But the NAV calculation still happens off chain.
Okay.
It makes sense to calculate the NAV on chain if also the underlying assets are on chain. If you hold your assets in a wallet or so, then you can also use Oracle for pricing and whatnot, and then you can really fully automate the NAV. But this really makes sense if you have underlying assets that are
traded on chain.
Exactly. Okay. If you have everything that is off chain, your investor coming with their normal bank, coming with a normal bank transfer, fiat or so, and all the underlying assets are not tokenized, then you just don't need to have the NAV on chain. It remains the same. Then if you want to have the fund units being tokenized, yes, you can do it. But the NAV calculation, you can keep it off chain.
Okay.
I think, but it's important to realize too, that for this to work, all the service providers need to sort of move towards the same direction, in the sense that there's the systems, if they would like to automate the NAV from an IM point of view, from a fund administrator, but also from a custody point of view, all the systems need to be integrated together.
Yeah.
So I think that is one of the biggest blockers I'm seeing, because, I mean, as we all know, funds operate in a very regulated environment, and people and organizations need time to obviously have confidence and, understand exactly the regulation versus the calculating an NAV on blockchain.
What's your blocker? What have you seen in Camilleri Preziosi? Like if to stream, why are people not tokenizing yet? I guess many are talking about it, right? So
no, many are talking about tokenization, but I guess the asset management industry in Malta is dominated by the small and medium-sized players. So we do not have the BlackRocks of this world domiciled in Malta. So back to your earlier point, Riccardo, I don't think there's the financial muscle yet behind the managers to invest heavily to start tokenization. And we speak a lot about tokenization. And that's good, because it starts kind of generating a bit of an ecosystem and people get interested. But I think we need to be mature as a jurisdiction. I mean, it's not just talking about something and expecting that everything is going to fall into place, right? We need to ensure that we invest in knowledge and then invest in bringing the right people to Malta, the right experts to Malta, so the younger generation can also feed off these people and learn of these people. That is the only way I think we can reach a level of maturity.
It's more education, you think?
Investor knowledge.
Yeah, investor and bringing the front office people to Malta. I mean, I think one of the mistakes we've done in the asset management industry is we've focused a little bit too much on GRC in the past decade or so, which means that there are loads of compliance officers and risk managers and MLROs, but in terms of front office portfolio management, that's a bit lacking. So I think what we need to do here is bring the actual experts to Malta in order for the ecosystem to learn of them. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the lack of education here or the regulation or so on. I mean, I had a discussion with the MFSA recently and their approach here for tokenization for funds. I think it's very interesting. They had the approach of tokenization is something that belongs to the fund administrator. So they say, yes, you can tokenize a fund as long as you disclaim everything into the PPM of your fund and so on. And if the fund administrator as well has knowledge of and dealing with wallet, dealing with blockchain transaction, and so on. So that's interesting. This is not the approach that other regulators, for example, in Luxembourg, they said, okay, it needs to be on the fund manager side. In there, they created this blockchain law number 4 that basically says it creates this new kind of license regime where you give a control agent function where the IFM itself needs to have this license to tokenize your fund. But then after now a while, we don't see many use cases because at the end of the day, it's something that belongs to the fund admin, not to the fund manager.
And I believe one license was issued in Luxembourg, right?
Yeah, just one
So
there. Even if it's
we're talking
early,
about Luxembourg here.
yeah, but I'm not sure it's about being early or not mature enough because we have with Fume going into other jurisdictions and seeing other cases in Luxembourg, Middle East, Hong Kong, Cayman, and so on. In there, they started having regulation much earlier, regulation for tokenization, for stable coins, and so on. And still a lot of discussion, a lot of tokenization frameworks, a lot of licenses, and so on. Now MiCA in Europe coming in there, and still, even in Luxembourg and other places, how many live use cases are there? Very close to none.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's really interesting to know.
And you see the asset manager that are dealing with it. Like the knowledge is there, the licenses. Before you could say, if there are no regulatory clarity in there, maybe you don't want to go into that space. No, it's there. And it's there now for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Okay, it's not 10 years, but still, you should start seeing the first ones. Well, you don't see many of those. Okay. So we were starting asking, okay, why is that the case? And it might go back to the initial question. Like when we talk with fund administrators, and they often ask, okay, but why should we tokenize a fund? And already, if someone is asking this question, we might already have a problem, right? If many people say, you should tokenize a fund because it's great, it gives you liquidity, it gives efficiency, and so on. Does it really? Like many people are either excited about, but then at the end of the day, they might not see the
So what is the real use case? When does it make sense to tokenize a fund?
Yeah, exactly. Let's look into that. The whole idea of tokenizing an investment fund is to make your fund administration simpler, like easier, more efficient. If you don't achieve this goal, then why are you doing that in the first place? If it's something that works, you don't have to show it or to tell people for 1 to 5 years. I mean, tokenization started, in 2017, 2020. We are in 2026 right now. And people are still talking, it's great, you should definitely do it. Yeah, probably there is something about it. So then we started looking into other approaches. So what other ways currently today you can increase the simplicity, so make your fund administration simpler and easier and more efficient? Well, and the answer might be AI. And here there might be a very nice transaction of having an AI agent basically managing your tokenized fund. Here I want to explain a little bit the 2 different approaches and the realization that we currently had. The idea of having a tokenized investment fund is basically building a very systematic program software tool. Like you might think, okay, an investment fund is something very programmatic. You have investor coming in, you have to issue shares, investor going out, you have to burn shares. You do an NAV, you know how much management fee to extract, you just have to pay and then notify when it's paid. So a set of rules, you build those set of rules, and then you're good to go. This is not the reality. When we started working with the fund administrator, you see that different fund administrators work extremely in different ways. The same fund administrator with different funds works every fund super differently. The NAV the system, they might use one system, the other system, the equalization of shares or whatever series accounting, each of those is different. And then there are always use cases, even if, let's say, for one series is behave a certain way, and then, yes, but this month, this user, and so on. So it's very difficult building a rule based approach for investment funds. So the idea of tokenizing a fund, in theory, it's possible. In practice, it's not picking up for this reason. And I think there is a very interesting, let's say, similar stories that we have seen with self-driving car. Okay, what we have seen in the past few years, this promise they started, 10 years ago. Self-driving car are going to come here because you can just make more roads much safer. And ideally, that's the same thing. You can just say, okay, if it's a red light, you stop. If it's a green light, you go. If there are the lines, you don't go, you don't cross. You just build more and more of this set of rules. The reality is that, it's getting better and better, but it's still not there. There are so many corner cases when you go around and drive. Someone crosses the street, there is a kiddo passing by, or the road is blocked, or there is something in there. So there are too many exceptions. And I think fund administration is A very good analogy for the self-driving car. What now is revolutionizing the self-driving is now AI. AI is coming in there. You don't tell AI, when it's red, you stop. When there is a light, don't cross it. AI, you tell them, look what this human is doing. Those group of humans train on there. If the humans see red, generally they stop. If there is a line, generally they don't cross in there. You don't tell them what to do. You just say, look at what other people are doing. And this is what we are doing as an approach with Fume. We come in there, we now build an agentic system for fund administrator that is the same thing. You just look at what the fund admin business is, how people are treating the data, treating email, reconciling data and transaction from different exchanges, banks, API, email, whatnot, Excel. And this is the beauty of it. You don't need to build yet a new platform, a new software that is connecting to thousands of API and then do everything programmatic. No, you just have an AI agent that is very flexible. You send them, an email, read the email. You have an Excel file with the different formats. It can understand, just like a human would. You have a fax machine, whatever. You can even get to that level in there, but it can work with much more heterogeneous systems. So it doesn't need to have those boundaries. And I think this is the interesting part.
And one fund is never similar to another.
Absolutely.
But we do have funds which I would say are simple, and having an agent on these funds to test how it will work is what we and Riccardo are doing. So we believe that even though we have funds where it might not happen now, but we do have funds where they can act as a good test at this stage.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea is then you're going to have the fund tokenization tool that is going to be used by agents, not by humans. So you don't want to have a human to learn how to deal with a blockchain transaction and then to maintain a shareholder register in there. So right now, if you do an NAV calculation, you have to maintain the cap table through your current system or local database, a spreadsheet, doesn't matter. Right now, if you want to do the move and update the register on chain, you can do it, but then it's going to be very seamless. You have an AI agent interacting with the tokenized fund. But yeah.
Okay, so taking the performance fee, for instance, that's a kind of a very, very well. It's a bit probably the most complex fee computation there. And as you said, there's many different permutations. There's high watermark. There's by reference outperformance of an index. You've got hurdle rates.
Performance links to indices. So there's
series and equalization. So what we're saying is that we feed, perhaps at the first instance, the manual computations to the AI agent, and it will learn off that and kind of then streamline the process. So what I'm hearing is that, tokenization is meant to make investment in a fund more frictionless.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate objective, which I think is direly needed to make funds more attractive again for investment.
Yeah, and you can just use the agent to get the output. So to your point, do you really need to have an agent calculating everything or have a new tool to calculate the NAV? No, you just say, okay, these are the operation, I want the result. So it just look at how you would calculate the NAV and it gives you the final result. That's the direction we're going.
And that's where the fund administrator then is involved in the process. So the fund administrator will be looking at the output at that point.
Okay.
So that is why before I told you I don't believe that this will sort of replace fund administrators completely.
Okay. And what type of distributed ledger technology are we seeing in use when it comes to tokenization of fund shares? Is there one particular or many?
Meaning about what kind? So the question, what kind? I guess there are the two main kinds. There are the public blockchain, and other things that are not blockchain. So there are some private permissioned or so, which are, I don't call them blockchain. They are.
I was referring more to the public because, more to the public. So Riccardo, what type of ecosystems are being used in terms of use cases? What are you seeing in practice?
Yeah, so in terms of what kind of blockchain we see out there, we started seeing the first use cases maybe on Ethereum, right? Then layer 2, Base, Arbitrum, and so on. To be fair, we started with layer 2, was much more efficient to work on those chains. In the past few months or past year, Ethereum mainnet became so efficient then now we can even deploy on mainnet. It just costs a few cents or a few dollars, even working on Ethereum. So no need to.
So you think Ethereum will be the leader in this space, or at the moment, as things stand, is Ethereum looking like it has the lead?
Absolutely, that it clearly has the lead. We've seen other approaches maybe on Bitcoin chain, but it's still, let's say, very early. They don't really have a fully smart contract platform. And all the other ones, maybe Solana, it's in there, but I think it's far behind.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And in terms of regulation of the actual technology, because we're used to an ecosystem where, I mean, funds settle T+1, T+2. We know what the risks are. There's the custody risk, the settlement risk. Now we're transforming the risk, right? There's the risk of technology failure and concentration risk. I mean, how do you see the space developing? Do you think that we'll have regulation, or creating a new set of too big to fail type institution? What's your view on that?
In my opinion, I think, as you rightly said in the beginning of the podcast, I don't think there's enough sort of intellectual knowledge in relation to blockchain and AI security in Malta. But in my opinion, I do believe that cybersecurity and wallet security, and also having all the systems integrating together, which might cause confusion or might cause any issues with the NAV calculation on the blockchain. So I think those three factors, having integration with all the other service providers, having cybersecurity and also wallet security in check, I think is a determining factor when we come to use blockchain to calculate NAV.
Yeah, and if I top on that, I think it's important for the regulators to focus on the players and not on the means, not on the technology itself. You don't have to regulate a blockchain. You don't have to regulate a way of storing data or whatever. You regulate the players. What by this, I mean, if you need to know at all time as a fund manager or a fund administrator who your investors are, this is the regulation. So you need to do a report once a year. Okay. Then if you want to store the data on your local database, on a piece of paper or on a blockchain, that's up to you. Yep. If you want to have a tokenized register, and then you have your investor that come in with stable coins or so, and then they get directly with wallet. Okay, you want to know at all time who are your investors. Whenever there is a transfer, you need to do a check in there. Or whenever there is a subscription redemption, same stuff for the reporting. Then this is the whole idea. It's not about how you store the data. It's about the principle. I mean, we discussed with multiple regulators here in Luxembourg, in the Middle East and so on, in Hong Kong. It's always the same stuff. They are principle-based. Yeah. You do the AML, you check.
And this is a conversation that me and Riccardo had a couple of weeks ago. I mean, just taking, for example, imagine a transfer is done from one investor to another via a smart contract. At the end of the day, we would still need to make sure that the investor that the token is being transferred to is eligible, his jurisdiction, that the register is correct. So, as Riccardo is saying, the supervision of the output and the controls around that supervision, I think, is imperative to make this work, and obviously not to have a lot of regulation on the actual software, but on the individuals who are monitoring the process.
Okay. Maybe a last question to wrap up. Where do you see the industry going in the next few years?
Well, I guess I alluded this before, but I guess AI is going to play a much larger role in the digitalization of everything that is processes in the fund administration space, fund management space, and they're more than on the trading side, really on the repetitive tasks, getting data from brokers, calculating the NAV, communication with the investors, and so on. All of this stuff, you can really, really automate a lot.
From my end, I do believe it is the future, especially AI. We are already seeing it now. So even our accounting software is including AI agents to help us work and to help us make reconciliations easier and more efficient and more transparent. So I do believe that it has started. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but I do believe that in the future, NAVs will be calculated via AI, obviously with the support of the fund administrator, making sure that the output and the desired results are being achieved.
Okay, thanks both. Thanks for being here. That's a wrap.